Well, here we are once again getting together and talking about the bid no bid decision today. And our hope for you is that we're going to save some time and money. But just to let you know what some of my goals are in this class today is I'm hoping to educate the new, motivate the frustrated, and validate the experience. So if you've been doing this for a while, I bet a couple things we're going to say today is you're going to be like, oh my God, yes, I've been living through that. But if you're new to this, there's going to be a couple of shocking things you're going to hear that are brand new to your ears, and we're going to have to prepare you for some of that. And also, there's a lot of companies out there that are frustrated. So we're going to get you out of frustration and into selling, hopefully. So let's just get the conversation going about the bid no bid decision. We'll be covering that today. We're going to try to save you time and money, save you heartbreak and pain. There's nothing worse than writing a loser proposal and working on something weekends, evenings, etc., and then you lose. So we want to try to avoid that as much as possible, and also create great relationships, not only with the federal government, but within your own team. And we have a new saying that I want you to take back to the office and put it on the refrigerator in the kitchen. Write less proposals, win more. Or I have another saying, only write winners. So take those two statements down because that's going to be some of our goals for today. So as we begin, this is going to be one of those conversations, the bid no bid decision, that you're going to be honing and tracking and tweaking, and you're going to get better and better and better at it over the years. So understand that you're not alone. So many companies struggle with this topic. It's so easy to get sucked into an opportunity that you think is perfect for us, and frankly, it isn't. You just didn't realize it wasn't until it was too late, till after you wrote the bid. So the idea here is, if just 10 of you pass on a loser proposal, I don't know, maybe we would have, and every one of those proposal efforts was $10,000. Within this hour, maybe $100,000 would have been saved in this hour conversation. So Judy and I are very, very dedicated to wanting to save you time, money, heartbreak, and pain. And that's what today is. We're going to get through all of this together. So if you shift your approach in federal contracting to building relationships and sales rather than writing proposal after loser bid, after blind bid, we've done our job today. Our idea is to flip the conversation to getting in as early as possible and only writing proposals we knew were coming down the pipeline. So let's kind of define, everyone says bid, bid, bid. What are these things? There's different types of ways to write a proposal to the federal government. One is what they name an RFP. An RFP is where it's a request for a proposal, and it's typically a public bid found on sam.gov in the contract opportunities section of sam.gov. The request for proposal process is very detailed. It usually includes not only what are your rates and what is your past performance, but they might want to see your financials. They might want to see exactly how you're going to manage the contract. What are your safety protocols? How are you going to handle bench strength and risk? So they're going to be asking a lot of very, very detailed questions, and that process is much longer. Now, the difference between a request for proposal and a request for quote or a task order proposal, usually you're already on something they would call a contract vehicle. You've already been pre-selected because maybe you filled out the request for a proposal. Let's say, for example, you filled out the GSA application. It took you a year to do that and to get approved. That was a request for proposal you were filling in. But then when tasks actually come through the GSA schedule, it's usually just an RFQ that's only about 25 pages. It'll be, give us a description of how you're going to respond to this task, give us 3 past performances, give us a price. It's much shorter and much easier to do if there's already a contract vehicle in place. Now, there's other types of proposals or bids that are really easy, and it might have to do with products that they need to buy quickly, or a real quick service like a training that you might offer. The simplified acquisition process, all they need are 3 bids from 3 vendors that are not on a contract vehicle. So for example, let's say there's a hurricane, I don't know, that hits Florida. That would never happen, right? And all of a sudden, there's a rule called the Stafford Act, which is they have to, FEMA and other agencies, have to do work with the local vendors first. And a lot of those vendors are barely registered on SAM that can actually respond. So they're probably going to work a little bit more with simplified acquisitions, getting 3 quick quotes from 3 vendors in that territory, and that's it. I mean, they just might get your typical quote in whatever fashion. They ask you to fill it out and just give it to them, and then they make a purchase from there. Simplified acquisitions are usually $250,000 or less, but we've seen them for higher. For example, during the pandemic, there were lots of simplified acquisitions that happened because they raised the dollar amount to $750,000. So if we did some data analysis, we might see some bigger awards using the simplified acquisition process. Now, also, they would call that open market as well. Open markets when they don't have a contract vehicle and they're not really putting it on SAM, they're just going to 3 vendors, like picking up the phone and calling 3 vendors and getting a quote. Sole source negotiated is kind of fun because maybe they're gonna get 3 quotes from 8A contractors, and they narrow it down to 1, and then they start negotiating the rates for it. So there's negotiate, and then there's the sources sought, or RFI. Sources sought is simply them looking for just small businesses, for example. They might have a big opportunity and the small business officer saying, hey, make sure you shop small. So they put a sources sought or an RFI to say, Ali X and free any smalls that can do this. And all the small businesses send in their sources sought, and they determine whether or not they're capable. And if they think that the project's just way too big for a small, they say they collected the information, but they still open it up to the large businesses. So when you're responding to a sources sought, just prepare yourself for doing some marketing and reaching out to the people behind the sources sought in RFI, because it hasn't come out as a bid yet, so you can still talk to them. So what's the time frame? Kind of gave you a little bit of an idea. RFPs can take 200 days or more to award. For example, and some can take years. Like there was a new IDIQ that was coming out of Health and Human Services called CIO SP4. That was the nickname for an IDIQ for IT services for HHS. And that bid went out in 2021. And they've pre-awarded the winners, but there's still some protests happening and some other things. So that thing took quite a while, and that's not even an award for actual work. It's simply a contract vehicle to start running proposals through and bids through so that they have a pre-negotiated list of companies that are approved. So the time frame can also depend on the size and the complexity of the deal. If you were selling a couple pieces of hardware, they could probably do a micro purchase threshold, get their credit card out. If it's under $10,000, they can just buy from you directly. Boom, done. But if it's a whole IT project or a whole building of a building, it's going to be much more extensive. Most bids take 30 to 90 days that are in order to respond to, but then it takes a lot of time for them to make the actual decision. But understand that this time that you're putting in, I know some of you are proposal writers and say 30 days. I wish I had 30 days. In fact, earlier before we began, someone was talking about a 7-day turnaround that they had coming up. So they're all hands on deck are working on that one deal. So, but most can take, the big ones can take 30 to 90 days, and you might throw 4 people at this. And let's just take 40 hours a week, average at $100 an hour. Remember, you're including, their rent and all their expenses and anything that they're involved in. And then don't forget the lost business, because you're writing proposals rather than going after new business. You multiply 4 individuals for a month, 40 hours a week, it can add up to like $65,000 to write a proposal. So you need to start thinking about timeframes and what it's going to cost you to write this proposal.